Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and absolutely delighted that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in that mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have two wonderful guests for you today. First up, Katie Mazeika. She is here to celebrate Maybe Just Ask Me. It's a beautiful book about folks becoming friends with people who are different from us. Also joining us later in the show, Michael Cooper is here to celebrate his debut picture book. It's called How to Make a Perfect S'more. Hey, I want to take a minute to tell you about what's happening at Connecticut Book Festivals. It's the latest podcast in the Reading with Your Kids family of podcasts. We are having such a great time. I am meeting such amazing authors. One of them was an author named Eric Litsky. This guy is hilarious. Just imagine what a conversation with the author of Frying Pork Chops Naked would be like, okay? You got it in your mind. It's a lot of fun. That's what we had. We had a lot of fun with Eric. He tells us about his passion for storytelling, the importance of preserving family history, and just sharing some of the funny mishaps that inspired his writing. You're going to love this podcast. It really is wonderful. I'm having a great time. I know you're going to have a great time. Check it out. It's available on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Podcasts. Wherever you find Reading with Your Kids, you can find Connecticut Book Festivals. Are you looking for a creative way to bond with your kids? Let me tell you all about Drawing with Your Kids, the ultimate destination for artistic adventures. Join us as we dive into the wonderful world of children's books with renowned illustrators guiding you step by step. From beloved characters to whimsical scenes, unleash your imagination and create cherished memories together. Whether you're a seasoned artist or just picking up a pencil, there's something for everyone at Drawing with Your Kids. Please visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com, and click on the Drawing with Your Kids link at the top of the page and let the creativity flow. Drawing with Your Kids, where every stroke brings stories to life. Join us right now from the lovely city of Cleveland. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new picture book. It's called Maybe Just Ask Me. Please welcome to the show, Katie Mazeika. Hey, Katie, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Katie and I were just having a wonderful conversation about the cold and snow and lake effect snow and glass. I forget what you were saying about
the
that.
Greenhouse effect.
The greenhouse effect around the lake. It was fascinating. But I think our audience is really going to be fascinated learning about Maybe Just Ask Me. I was reading the notes, and it sounds like a powerful, important book.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope so. It's based on my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 3, I lost my eye to cancer, and I had rhabdomyosarcoma. I lost my right eye, and as a result, I was in and out of hospitals. And finally, right before my 6th birthday, I was in a hospital for about 5 months. And there were complications to the initial surgeries. And so I was in for several brain surgeries. I ended up, they shaved my head and I had a scar. So it's about going to school after all that. First grade, you're starting school, you're trying to make friends. And coming in as a kid with an eye patch and a headscarf, and knowing you look different, and trying to connect with kids, and kids are wild. They have imaginations. I still get it today, and I hear and that's what it's about. Is just the need to just talk openly and honestly about disability, as opposed to teaching kids don't look at somebody who's different, pretend not to see them, because I think that is more stigmatizing and more hurtful than to pretend you don't see somebody. And I know it's coming from a place of kindness, but I think it's more helpful to say, no, it's okay. Yes, you can talk about a difference, and they can say no, they don't want to tell you, or they can share. But I think if we teach kids that it's okay to be open and honest about differences, that's healthier.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. And I know from personal experience that when you are dealing, I had surgery on both my legs in 23. And so coming after I got out of the wheelchair, I was in the leg braces. And my wife and I jokingly called them my bionic legs. And I know going into restaurants, people would look because it was very obvious.
Yes.
And little kids especially would just be curious. And I would kind of diffuse it just by saying hi and, maybe making a joke about it. But, people even today, with all the advances we've made in terms of making our world more accessible for folks with disabilities, helping us have more understanding about it, it still makes lots of folks uncomfortable when they see somebody who is different.
Well, I think it makes people uncomfortable, and kids interpret that, and then they repeat that back. I know, and I think that if we stop with that when they're young, and say, that we all understand that there are things about us that make us different, and that talking about them sort of demystifies them and shows how we're the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And connects us.
I'm curious. You mentioned that going into first grade, so age 6 or 7, you have an eye patch. Your head is covered in a scarf. You don't have hair. Obviously you dealt with pain and whatnot. How did your teachers approach it, and were they modeling, making a good model for your classmates?
I was very, very fortunate. I grew up in a very, very small suburb of Cincinnati, and a lot of the moms knew my mom. My mom was a teacher at the school district, so the teachers knew my mom. And I think the general when I showed up, and we sort of emphasized it a little the other direction with Maisie because of for the story. But when I showed up, I think there was an understanding ahead of time. The teachers had been front loaded. This has happened because they knew my mom, and they knew I'd been going through this. In fact, when I was in the hospital for that long period of time, it was my mom who had been with me. The hospital was Cleveland Clinic, and I was from Cincinnati, but her family was in Cleveland, so she literally lived in Cleveland and would come into the hospital every day to see me, because back then you weren't allowed to stay with your kids. They made her leave every day at 7. And so she had to leave work, she had to take a leave of absence to be here with me. So I think within the school community, within the teachers, it was known and understood. And I was very, very lucky on that. I don't think, and I remember, this is how different it was back then. I remember literally being sent to school with pills in my pocket. And they were to send me to the bathroom at noon to go take them. And I remember that clearly because I was a 6-year-old. I played with them, you know, and shared them with the other. Yeah, like I can remember another kid and I taking them apart in the bathroom and going, "What's inside these?" And I'm like, "Well, no wonder we're not kids." Yeah, it's comments, but I can remember doing that, pulling the capsules apart and emptying them out. Yeah, but my point being that it was much more casual. You know, it's noon, Katie, go take your pill.
Right.
In that it was, I don't think anybody knew what to do. So everybody kind of like pretended this is this is normal. And the teachers pretended not to see. I think the hardest thing was, though, I had been in a hospital for so long. And when you're a kid in the hospital with thousands of adults always around you and paying attention to whatever you're doing because they're worried something's wrong, and then you throw me in a classroom with 25 kids, it was very hard for me to adjust.
I bet.
And it was just very weird for me to look around and say, what do I do with these kids? I don't know how to communicate to kids. But I think everybody tried to normalize it and almost pretend it didn't exist.
Okay.
They knew about it, but nobody knew how to talk about it. Nobody ever asked me about it.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asked me about my eye. And I almost think it was because they were always told not to. My friends would come back to me as I got older with stories that had circulated. They said, oh, yeah, so-and-so said this. And we'd laugh about it because my friends knew. But nobody, I can't remember anybody ever directly asking me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised because that was, I'll be polite. Don't ask. You know, that's private. And I'm happy that we are encouraging kids to ask questions. I think we need to talk to our kids about how to ask.
Yes.
Curiosity
with kindness is what I say. So polite, being polite and understanding that you will have to hear no sometimes, and that's okay.
It's interesting. We've had a number of different parents come on talking about the issue of disabilities and asking kids. One of the parents kind of surprised me because her attitude was, we'll talk about it, but first I want you to ask my son to be a friend. And once they're friends, it's not going to matter. And, so her thing was ask my son to be a friend. And then you're not going to need to talk about it because you're just going to be friends. You're not going to see the disability, which I don't know is all that real.
Well, see, that's where that's my problem here is pretend you don't see it.
Right.
And I go in and do school visits and I know the classrooms that have been told she only has one eye. Don't stare, pretend you don't notice, because those are the kids that won't look me in the eye. Those are the kids that are looking all around the room and doing whatever they can not to notice by staring at me. And it's like, and then I usually start off with, it's okay. I know. I know about it. It's okay. You can notice. But they're always looking at their teacher going, see, I'm not staring. And it's like, I feel bad for those kids because it's human nature, and I know it's human nature, and we can't expect kids not, to be more grown up than we are. I mean, it's basic human nature for anybody, adults too, and adults usually have more self-control. But you put a group of first graders in there, there's no self-control.
Right.
And once I say, yes, I know I have one eye, it's okay, and then talk to them about it. They're over it, and then we're on to something new. And I think that's a piece of it is once they know, then they can think about other stuff. But if it's been made into this mystery that we don't talk about, then that's the only place their brain will go. Right.
Yeah. I'm curious. I hope you don't mind me asking this. I'm curious. I had an uncle who was missing an eye, but he had a prosthetic. I don't know if that's the name, a prosthetic eye. We call it a glass eye. That he would pop out for parties. But I'm curious why you've chosen not to use one.
Couple reasons. One, and I wouldn't wear a wig either. My mom offered, and we looked at them, and they itched, and I'm like, no, I wouldn't do the wig. I couldn't do it. The eye, as I don't have an eyelid. I lost the eyelid. And when I was a kid, I had no eyelid, and I had no cheekbone. That was put in when I was about 21, 22, and a secondary surgery. But the cheekbone, so I had no eyelid and no cheekbone. So the only way they could come up with an eye, it didn't look anything like a real eye. Because they would have to try to make an eyelid, and it would have to, match my skin tone, and then it fluid. The muscles were totally gone. There was nothing to hold it. So there wasn't a way to do it that wasn't almost like a piece of rubber mask. And for a long time I wore an eye patch like you see what Maisie wears. Until at some point somebody made a nasty pirate comment to me in front of my kid. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. And that's when I gave up the eye patch. Because I didn't care. But when it was in front of my daughter and she was about 2 or 3, I was like, I don't think she should have to hear this.
Right.
And so I stopped wearing the eye patch. The other half of it was the eye patch was incredibly irritating. If you look at photos of me from my childhood, they moved me between 3 different eye patches because each one had a different way of being a problem. Like either rashes on the skin, rashes on my forehead from the strap on the patch. There was a different problem. So we just rotated through them all the way through. And I have photos and all kinds of eye patches because of that. But it was kind of like, you know what? I don't know why at some point in my childhood, everybody decided don't let anybody see her eye. And I kind of decided as an adult that was stupid. We don't need to do that. And stopped wearing the eye patch altogether. And I found that I stopped getting the pirate comments that way.
Sure.
And the R maybe and stuff like that when I was all that stopped.
I could see how that would get old after a couple of days, never mind decades.
There is a show on Apple, Bad Sisters, with a woman who wears an eye patch. And in the first episode, somebody walked by and made that comment to her, and I thought, wow, somebody who writes for this show is wearing an eye patch. Because that was it just triggered me. That is so accurate. That is exactly what happens. People just, for whatever reason, think they have a right to say something. Yeah.
You have an incredibly positive spirit about you. I mean, it's sincere because the minute we popped and started this conversation before we hit record, it was very obvious. You've obviously going through cancer, it was incredibly difficult and I'm sure very painful. Dealing with, the stares and the matey comments was very difficult. How have you managed to stay so positive and upbeat?
I don't know. There's so much I love, and I'm just, I think my mom was the one who always reinforced, we're so lucky you're here, we're so lucky you're here, you need to appreciate it. I think maybe I sort of took that to heart. I feel very fortunate. That I happened to be where I was when I got sick. They happened to have some sort of a program going that was totally a trial. And they put me in it, and it worked. It was just sheer luck. Yeah. So, and I'm thrilled, and I look at myself today, and I feel like, all right, what can I do? And what I want to do is help kids who are like me when I was, and help them feel seen, and help kids who aren't, disabled in any way, maybe understand kids who look different. for whatever reason, and be able to empathize. So, but I don't know. I'm always being positive. You know?
Well, one of the things that you just said was your mom, and your mom said to you, "We are so lucky that you're here," as opposed to, "Oh, you're very lucky and you're very blessed." That's the idea that we are blessed to still have you here, and that's something that I've been saying to people in my life now that I'm almost 100, and it makes to me it's very sincere. When a friend of mine has been sick, and I'm very thankful for the person. They're out of their they're out of their pain. They're regaining health. But I just celebrate the fact that I still have you in my life, and I think that attitude. I bet that your mom's attitude has contributed a lot to your positive outlook.
Oh, I suspect you're right, and because she was, that was something she'd say a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think that's something we should say to our kids every once in a while.
Oh, yeah.
We're so lucky that you were born. We're so lucky to have you in our lives.
I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. Kids need to hear that.
When here's you are the author and the illustrator of Maybe Just Ask Me. And I bet that there are first graders out there who've said, "How can you be such a great artist with only one eye?"
Yeah, well, see, it doesn't limit you at all. It doesn't. I loved all the way through school writing and reading. I was a huge reader too, and but I always drew. I always drew, and it didn't take me. It took me until I was an adult. I would always draw pretty little princesses, and it took me to be an adult to be like, stop drawing the pretty princesses, because I think in my brain that's what I wanted was to be just perfect little. And I said, no, nobody's perfect. And it was more fun to draw less than perfect.
Yeah.
And but I drew, and I went to art school. I had a wonderful mentor who used to call me a pit bull, because I knew what I wanted, and I never stopped working for it. And he would always say, "You are a pit bull, just keep going." So I was very fortunate. And then the other half of it is I have a wonderful, supportive husband. And when we got married and had kids, I said, I want to be home with the kids when they're young. And he was all for that. He said, then don't work. And when my kids got older, I started doing this again, because it was what I knew. And he was 100% for it. Even for the first, probably 6-7 years where I didn't make a dime, I was just putting together stuff and getting a portfolio out there and learning and getting dummies out there. And now he's thrilled. He's like, well, when am I going to retire? And I'm like, don't hold your breath. These are picture books. But, yeah. So I was lucky in a lot of ways. But the best thing for somebody who wants to be an artist, like, to draw. Just draw. I mean, and if there's something you don't draw well, like I used to be terrible at hands, draw them as many times as you can until they're easy. The more you do it, it'll eventually become easy. I just would do hands like crazy and just pull up photos of hands until they didn't bother me anymore.
Wonderful.
It really does. You just figure out what you're stuck on and then focus on it.
Great advice. I love it. You have authored and illustrated a number of books yourself, including Maybe Just Ask Me. You've also illustrated for other authors. Do you have a preference?
It's almost like a different part of your brain's being used. When I'm working on one right now. I have one coming up. It's about building a Sears kid house, and I wrote it also. And so because I'm the writer and the illustrator, I'm like, I'm going to put the art here and pull back words, and I get the right to do that because I'm both. When I'm an illustrator, it's like I can turn part of my brain off and go more on the, this is set in stone, what the author knows what they want to say. How can I make this better? How can I add to it and make it sing more and bring out, the point or the message or whatever.
Uh-huh.
So it's almost like I'm focused a little bit differently because my brain isn't looking. I'm not thinking about the text the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do the art for something I wrote, I'm looking at the text and saying, at the same time as I'm trying to make it better, I'm also thinking I can bring this out better with a piece of within the illustration than I can with the words. And so I'm thinking that way too. So it's almost more mine, more. I have to. It's more brain power. So
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm more relaxed when I'm illustrating for other people because I don't have to think that way.
Okay. Interesting.
I don't know. Did that make sense?
No, it does. It does. I'm just fascinating and one of the things that's fun about being the host of Reading with Your Kids is that I get to tap into and learn other creatives' process, and it's neat at how different people create. I tend to when I've done educational magic shows for 35 years, and it's not always planned, but a lot of my creativity happens on stage in front of 600 kids. And it's fun because lots of times it doesn't work. And that's almost as fun as when it does work. When it does work, it's great. But when it doesn't work, it's like, all right, well, this was interesting.
Well, with kids, especially as an audience, you get to play off of their energy.
Yep.
And a lot of times, I love presenting and working with kids because a lot of times they'll throw something at you and you'll end up in a different direction.
Yep.
You'll be like, that's fabulous. Let's go with that and go down that path and see what happens.
Yeah.
And it's what's so wonderful about, and anything we do with kids is because their brains aren't following rules yet. They're still filled with imagination and not worried about, falling within the lines, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, I love kids.
They are great. And it's great that you've created a book for kids who have a disability, giving them a chance to see themselves positively portrayed in the pictures of a book. But I think it's even more wonderful that we have a book, a story out there that will help kids who are blessed not to have a disability, to give them a window into somebody else's life and to know that it's okay, to understand that a person who is different, person who has to do things differently, is a person and can be a wonderful friend.
Well, and I think that is very important. And I think I make the point in the back, and more for parents and caregivers, just a list of things to think about and to be supportive of people with disabilities. And there are words that we use that have become common that are really hurtful. There are, a lot of things we do thinking that they are kind fall under what I call a pity pedestal. And when we put kids with a disability on a pity pedestal, we other them.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful because all they want is to be part of the group.
Right.
And anything that others, it goes against that. So, yeah, and I hope parents and teachers will look at that list and talk about it with kids, because I think that will help kids with disabilities feel more included if we aren't using those words, or if we're not using the pitying language.
So share a couple of those words with us right now, please.
Lame, psycho, spaz. These are real popular words.
I didn't know those were still in use. I thought they went with the way of the R word. Okay.
And well, you would think they would, and you would hope they would, but those are still used, and they are hurtful.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Katie, where can we go to find out more about Maybe Just Ask Me and find out more about you?
My website is KatieMazeika.com, and that's E before I. It's counterintuitive in Mazeika. I'm there, and you can also find out more about maybe just ask me on the Simon and Schuster website.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Maybe Just Ask Me. Our guest has been Katie Mazeika. Katie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we invite our guest into the studio, I would love to invite you to visit a very special website. It's clownswithoutborders.org. Clownswithoutborders.org. This is a group that I absolutely adore. I am part of Clowns Without Borders, and I had the honor of being part of the 2023 tour of El Salvador. I had so much fun joining with artists from all over the world to bring a smile to people who really needed it and really appreciated it too. And we would love for you to join us as a monthly Joy Maker. The Joy Makers, they're a family of people just like you who love to laugh and make other people feel good. So please take a moment and visit clownswithoutborders.org and consider joining me as a Joy Maker. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back, written by Stephen Joseph and illustrated by Andy Case. In this third installment of the Snoodles series, the Zoodles are determined to have their revenge. With the help of a grimy millionaire who's fallen on hard times, they intend to poison the Earth's water supply and turn everyone into willy-nillys and dilly-dallies. Can Brianna and Ricky save the Earth again? Will the outcast kids on the other side of the track rise to the challenge and help save the world? You can find out with Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, The Zoodles Strike Back. This episode is brought to you by the Logan series. 3 wonderful books written by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Logan and the Missing Masterpiece, Logan and the Lost Luggage, Logan and the Missing Jewels. Logan and the Lost Luggage is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and all 3 of these books feature Logan, an adorable Cocker Spaniel who travels the world with his magic phone. You and your kids are going to love traveling around the world with Logan, meeting animals from all over the world, visiting different countries, and learning how to get along with people from other countries and other cultures. It's a beautiful series of books. Our Reading with Your Kids certified great read panel loved Logan and the Last Luggage. We know you're going to love all 3 books. Check it out today. The Logan series by Christine Ritchie McNamee. Join us right now from about a 5-minute drive from our Reedville Reading with Your Kids studios. We'd have to pass about 35 Dunkin' Donuts on the way, though. Our guest is here today to celebrate his brand new picture book. It's called How to Make a Perfect S'more. Please welcome to the show, Michael Cooper. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hey, Jedley. Thanks for having me. I'm wonderful. Thanks for asking.
I'm so happy that you're here. Michael and I were just chatting about all the places that we haven't met, but we've been to. You know, well, I'm almost 100 and he's much younger, but we grew up in not too far from each other, and now his mom is not too far away from me. So what a small world, huh?
Absolutely. It's good to happenstance like that.
Yeah. So tell us about this picture book, please.
Yeah, thanks. Again, my picture book is a first-time effort for me. This is not a traditional outlet for me. I'm not an author, so first-time author. And the book, How to Make a Perfect S'more, was really a brainchild of my son. He was walking past me in the kitchen one day, and he said, "Dad, you know, it would be amazing if we can make s'mores anytime we wanted." And I said, "Oh, that's a great idea." So I spun it into a bedtime story for him. And both my kids were like, "You know, that's great, but I think you need to take it a step further." A bit perplexed. "And what do you mean by that?" And they were like, "Well, what if we put pictures with it? And what if we turned it into a book?" So we kind of fell into this whole thing. And, I did this for a couple of reasons. One was to show my kids you could bring something from concept into reality. And it's been a really interesting learning experience.
Yeah. I bet. You know, before we dive deeper into the book, I think that that's a really valuable lesson for kids to see that they have the power to take an idea and make it more than just an idea, to actually bring it to fruition. There are lots of folks out there with ideas. I grew up in a traditional blue-collar family, and, you know, when I was growing up, the idea was you keep your mouth shut, you go to school, you get a job, and you stay in that job for 35 years. You try not to make waves, and the idea of starting your own business or creating something, that's something other people do. It's not something we do. To be able to show your kids that, hey, no, this is something this is our brainchild. We came up with it. We made it happen. And now the book is in the hands of families. And isn't that cool?
Absolutely. And it's been a family affair right from the beginning. The kids were crucial in the editing, review process, reviewing the illustrations, making adjustments. You know, kids are wonderful in that their filter isn't quite developed yet. So there's no hold bar with them. For better or worse, they're going to tell you whether they love it or you need to go back and rewrite something. So I'm very thankful for that and the age that they're still at. My son is 7, turning 8. My daughter's 9, turning 19. So it's been quite a ride.
Now, when they were making those suggestions, did they do it that politely? Was it like, oh, this is great, or Dad, you need to rewrite this? I'm imagining my 9-year-old going on 19 daughter would have worded it a little bit differently.
Oh, easily. Yeah, they can be your best supporter, and they can cut you like a knife. So no, they didn't put it as politely, but, you know, speaking truth to power and that honesty that we try to instill in them is, you know, something I'm appreciative for at this stage.
Yes. Well, it's very important, and I make light of it because I actually love it. My kids are now 28, 29 and 31, and they are not afraid to share their opinion. They do it a little bit more judiciously these days, but they're able to speak up for themselves and share their ideas and advocate for other people, which is really awesome to see when they do that.
Completely agree. That's something we raise our kids to do, is that, you know, go to school, get as much education as you can to be able to speak up for the people who either aren't represented, don't have a voice, or, you know, are just semi-marginalized. So, yeah, I completely agree with you.
So in How to Make a Perfect S'more, do we actually get a recipe? Do we see a step-by-step like they do on Instagram to how to make that perfect s'more?
So that's actually the bonus material in the book. But the premise behind the book is about a young boy named Miles who lives with his grandmother, and he's attending summer camp for the first time. And he's reluctant to go. He's never been before. And the kids that he goes to summer camp with have very different upbringings than he does. He lives with his grandmother in her apartment, and they've had very different worldviews and opportunities than he has. And some of the shortcomings that he has, the kids initially aren't very welcoming, and he ends up making a lasting and surprising friendship with an unsuspecting character, and the two of them end up building a bond that transcends. So that's the premise of the book. And yes, there are bonus recipes for Miles and Gus, the other main character, and his grandmother.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. When I launched Reading with Your Kids, I launched it probably in the same spirit that you created your book. I knew that my relationship with my now adult kids was built on a foundation of reading, and Reading with Your Kids led to cooking with your kids, led to drawing with your kids, led to watching TV and movies with your kids. And it's just a first step into a lifetime of activity together. And it sounds like that's something that you are right in the middle of right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have daily reading time with the kids. At a minimum, they have to get 20 minutes of reading time in a day. My daughter far exceeds that. She's at a point where, you know, she thinks it's cute that at bedtime she sneaks a book, and you know, she thinks she's, you know, breaking the rules and doing that. But, you know, we're nothing but supportive of that. And our son has really developed the last 2 years, where he was initially just into, you know, basic picture books, and he's just blowing us away with how far he surpassed it. I'm not sure if it's just based on the repetition of doing just a minimum of 20 minutes a day, but, we often find him, in a corner, just finding something he's interested in and going to town on it. And it's really broadened not only, their reading abilities, but their horizons in general. Books can take them all around the world. And, because of that, one of his destinations where he really wants to go is Japan. So we just started a kid's book on Japan for him. It's
Great.
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. I have a suggestion for you before you go back to Virginia. So we'll talk about that after
Sounds
we
good.
do this interview. I'm curious now. As I said, I think it's great that you had this bedtime story and your kids said we need to do something more with it, and then you went out and turned it into a book that actually exists right now that families have in their family libraries. But what gave you the notion that, we can do this? Where did you get the kind of knowledge to be able to put a book together and get it out there?
Oh, the knowledge has been evolving and very much still to this day. I have a close family friend who's written a couple novels, and she turned me on to a couple specific internet websites that had opportunities for editors and illustrators and marketing personnel, and all of that really started me down a path. I've had an opportunity to work with some amazing people, and I'm constantly learning as a direct result. So my illustrator, Penny Weber, has just been a true pleasure to work with. We really collaborated together on this venture, and we didn't have many disagreements on where the story should go, but I was very happy for her insights.
Yeah.
And same thing with marketing. I've had an amazing opportunity to work with Tara Lewis, and she has just really helped guide me through this process. And at times I felt like I was feeling around in the dark, but I feel like there's certainly more light now.
That's great. That's great. Now, did you ever have an inkling that you would be an author?
Absolutely not. This is not my nature. I do foreign policy by day work, but I've always been a storyteller. But this new medium is definitely different, and it's been really welcoming. I had the chance last year to read to both my kids' classes at school, and sitting there on the carpet and the chair and having all the kids lined up, and then to get to the final 2 pages of the book and see their light come on in their eyes as they saw where it was finally going and making those connections. It was really a powerful feeling.
That's really cool. Foreign policy. That's a phrase that we hear a lot of these days. But I don't think many of us really know what it is. So what foreign policy? Are you calling up folks in Japan and saying, "Hey, can you teach me how to make sushi?"
That would be fantastic. I would love to learn how to do that. And I failed at the 2 prior attempts to learn how to do that. A lot of that is just down to getting the rice correct, and I still haven't mastered that. But for me, it's really about sharing knowledge and information with foreign partners. So we have a key set of partners and allies that we engage with, and they're in my regular Rolodex, if we bring it back to the 80s for terminology.
Yeah. Rolodex. That's this thing we used to have on our desk. It was huge, and it was just like a carousel of information, names, and if you put it back, if you put a card back in the wrong place, you could look for it forever if it wasn't
Absolutely.
under the right letter.
Yeah. Now it's replaced by an iPhone or an Android contact list, but it wasn't that simple back in the day.
Yeah, we actually had to know telephone numbers and memorize them, and somehow we did. I mean, I still remember my numbers that I grew up with, but I struggle with my wife's number. Thank goodness it's in the phone.
Oh, completely. What's funny is that growing up, we had a distinct phone number. It ended 1113, but there was a local pizza joint that ended 1116, and the 3 and 6 are right on top of each other. So we would get calls by people misdialing the pizza place at least once a week.
Did you ever take one of the orders?
I think I was too young to realize the type of mischief I could have gotten myself into.
Growing up outside of Boston, all sorts of mischief was had. So you mentioned you mentioned that you're working on a new book, so it's obvious that you've caught the kids' book bug.
I have, yeah. It's I think we have an opportunity to spin this into a series. We get to watch Miles as the main character grow and have other life experiences, which now that my daughter's turning 9 turning 10 at the end of the year, I know she will have no shortage of challenges and experiences, and Miles will come into some of those opportunities and hurdles as well as he meets, people he's interested in developing relationships with. And, we have some chance ahead of us for, at a minimum, 2, if not 3 books out of this.
Awesome. I saw on your website you mentioned that you love to travel. What places in the world have you traveled to that made a real big impression on you?
Oh, for very different reasons. I've had a chance to go to Africa a couple of times. I've seen some very wealthy areas in Africa, North Africa specifically, and the people were just absolutely fantastic. But within Africa too, I've also seen among the poorest nations. So traveling, around from location to location, you see, unfortunately, kids that are only going around with shorts on, if that, living by the banks of the river, and their houses are nothing but 4 walls without a roof on it. That really had an impact for me. Mm-hmm. And coming back to the States and having that renewed sense of appreciation. It's something I can share verbally with my kids, and I can share it in picture, but to see it there and to be impacted by that, and it doesn't quite convey the same sentiment as it does in person. So, we're very fortunate to be living in America and have the opportunities that we have. When I think back to trips overseas like that, those have a lasting impact, both positively and negatively. If I had to think of a favorite trip overseas, it would probably be to New Zealand. I was fortunate enough to go, and it was a bank holiday, so I had an opportunity to go down to the South Island. I was traveling with a colleague, and we ended up hiking a glacier while we were there. So we helicoptered onto the glacier, we hiked around for a couple of hours, and then we helicoptered back off. Just once in a lifetime experience.
I bet. That's wild. Oh, boy, what an adventure. You're mentioning seeing poverty. I remember a few years back before the pandemic hit, my wife, my daughter's fiance, and I traveled to Costa Rica, which is a beautiful country, but there are pockets of poverty out in the rural areas of Costa Rica, away from the eco-tourist resorts in the capital. And I remember looking over at my daughter when she saw how some of these people were living as we were driving by these homes, and I was going to say it looked like she saw a ghost, but that would be flippant. She had it was painful for her to see it, and surprising. And I'm not happy that my daughter was sad and felt those emotions, but I'm happy she was able to and have empathy for people in that way. How do you think we could best kind of remind our kids that we are very blessed to be living not only in the States, but in places like Canada, the UK, and at the same time, there are pockets of extreme poverty in our country as well.
Absolutely. A couple things that we do with our kids is once a month we do a give back night where they organize at either a synagogue or a church, and you can volunteer and help build bags and bundles for homeless families or families that are struggling. So we've done that numerous times. And then my daughter has coined a term of homeless goodie bags, is what she ended up calling them several years ago. But excuse me, over the holidays, we get bags and we put together soap, toothbrushes, toothpaste, deodorant, towels, power bars, and vitamin water, hand sanitizers. And we go around and we keep them in the trunk of the car. So when we're at a traffic light, if people don't feel comfortable handing out money, they can hand out these bags to people that are struggling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful, wonderful way. I think it's important. Something like that, I think, is much more meaningful than just our kids seeing us handed $1 or some coins, because we not only have to give something that we worked for, but we have to take the time. And as we're taking the time to put the bags together to buy the different things, we're mindful that there are people, that these are going to people in need that are less fortunate than us.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Other than the book to Japan, where are you envisioning Miles possibly traveling to?
Oh, Miles is, in the draft that I have, he's definitely going to, he's going to stay stateside, but he's going to come in contact with a primary character from overseas, and her life experiences are going to be shown to Miles, and they're going to collaborate on their different backgrounds and upbringings to really expose us and new readers to different parts of the world.
Wonderful. Michael, where can we go to find out more about how to make a perfect s'more and find out more about you?
Absolutely. So it's available right now for pre-order on Amazon. It is also available now for purchase on Book Baby's bookstore. And my website is howtomakeaperfectsmore.com.
We've had a really fascinating time speaking to the author of How to Make a Perfect S'more. Our guest has been Michael Cooper. Michael, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Good Pods. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. And if you are listening to us on the AM/FM 24/7 radio network, the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, please be sure to tell your local station manager you love listening to Reading with Your Kids on their station. We also love for you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading with Your Kids on Instagram, at Jedley Magic on X. Of course, we have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, our website is a great place to visit, readingwithyourkids.com. If you are an author, you absolutely want to go to readingwithyourkids.com and find out how you can be a guest here on the show. Being a guest, it's fun, it's easy, and it gives you the chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Katie Mazeika. Please be sure to check out Maybe Just Ask Me. And also want to thank Michael Cooper. Be sure to check out How to Make a Perfect S'more. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.